As I have said a few times now, one of the big goals for me with this YouTube channel is to do something different, to go into more detail, to talk about money, and to hopefully allow everyone to learn something about farming and dairy farming, even if it is useless information that 99% of people will never need to know. Most of the stuff I watch on YouTube falls into that category of useless information I never need to know. But today's video, we're going on a deep dive into my milking parlour, the design of it, the cost of it, why I made the decisions I made, why a parlour over robots, all of that sort of stuff. It's not dry. I have a coding problem to fix first. I changed the code for the electronic automated light system last night, and they now will not turn off. They turn on and off, and they've done it for like 10 minutes. I'm sort of worried that they've done that all night long and that they were flashing for the entire night. But I'm going to go check the code, see what the problem is, and fix the bug so I can actually get these lights off, because there's no cows in the house and it's bright outside, so I'm just wasting electric. That's the second time I've tried to video them going on and off, and I missed them again. I think it's every 40 seconds, so I shouldn't have to wait long. There you go. Okay, it was a fairly simple bug. The symbols were the wrong way around. So it was always turning on the lights in this block of code and then setting the light state equals to 1, which allowed it to then turn off the lights here and set the light state equal to 0, which allowed it to go back in here and turn the lights back on again. So that should be the bug fixed. Not sure how to start this video, so I'm going to take you through our previous setup and how we got to here. So we started milking on this farm in 1976, and we built a 8-point swing-over milking parlour with jars. There's going to be lots of terminology in this video. I'll try to explain all of the little terminology words I say. So a swing-over is where you have a single cluster in the middle and it does both sides of cows. This milking parlour is what you call a doubled up, so each cow on each side gets its own cluster. But the previous milking parlour we had to this was an 8-point swing over, so we had 8 clusters total, 8 jars which the milk fed into, and then that milk went into the bulk tank. We had that parlour up until 2020 when we moved in here. So when that parlour was built, we were milking 80 cows. By the time we moved in here, we were milking 180 cows. Milking was taking 7.5 hours a day. Basically our entire day was spent milking. And in the new parlour, that's down to 2 hours. This was a huge upgrade over our previous setup, and it is not an exaggeration to say that this investment and this project totally transformed the business. You may ask, why did we not do this sooner? If it made so much sense and it actually made money, like we increased our profitability after building this, why did we not do it sooner? And the answer simply is we couldn't afford it. The bank manager would not lend us the money to build this, and it took me 7 years of hard work making the business more efficient, making the business more profitable, to be in a position where I could afford to invest in something like this. I had the mindset that I would be better to be patient and wait and build what I wanted to build rather than trying to build anything and rush it. And yes, we would have been in a new parlour quicker, but we wouldn't have had such a good milking parlour, which is now the backbone of this business for the next 20 years. I spent one day going to see other people's milking parlours, and after that day I got fed up with people trying to tell me that what I wanted was a bad idea and that what they were suggesting was better. So I decided to ignore everyone else's advice and just build what I wanted and what I thought was best. We started work on the groundworks in September 2018. It took about 4 months to get the tank done, and then it took another 3 months to get the shed done. So it was the middle of 2019, really, before the parlour was ready for block work, ready to put some floors in and get everything ready for the parlour manufacturer to start installing it. End of 2019, the installation work began. It was a slow process. The company I worked with to build this, they were fantastic. They gave me such good ideas. They had a big part in the design of this and how it all worked out, but they were not speedy, but that's okay. So we started milking in March 2020, and we moved from our 43-year-old 8-point swingover parlour with big glass jars that filled with milk into this milking parlour, and it was truly life-changing. So the rest of this video is going to be very detailed, very technical about the design decisions, about what's worked well, about what hasn't worked well. This will be extremely useful to the 5 people that watch this that are considering building a milking parlour, but for everyone else, I hope you still find this interesting about the thought process that goes into the design, about cow flow and how you can manipulate cows with slopes and lights, and about the overall efficiency of building a parlour like this versus building the more common parlour which most people would build. When I was planning this milking parlour, I had to set out my priorities, and everyone does this even if they don't actually think about it. So you're thinking, what is my number one goal? Is it to milk cows as fast as possible for at least capital expenditure? That's what most people think is their number one priority. Or is my priority a nice working environment, somewhere which I will enjoy spending a lot of my life, somewhere where I can find it easy to attract staff and to keep them? And that was my number one priority. So a lot of the decisions I made, especially the choice to go for a super wide pit and double it up, was with the idea that my number one goal was to make somewhere nice to be, nice to spend time, and nice to work in. Should also say, everything from here on out is my opinion. I'm not saying that I've done everything right. I'm not saying this is the best milking parlour ever. I made these decisions because I thought they were the best decision, and I still obviously think that. So I will not disagree with anyone. If you think something different, you're absolutely free to do that. So key advantages of a doubled up milking parlour. First and biggest advantage, especially when you're 6'5.5" like me, is there's nothing above your head. That allows you to have a much more spacious environment to work. Second advantage is it allows you to have a wider milking parlour pit. If you have a swingover milking parlour, you're limited by the length of the pipe going from the milking line up here down to the cow. So an efficient swingover parlour, you should have a really narrow pit, because the further you have to suck the milk up, the higher the vacuum pressures you will require. Another big advantage of a doubled up milking parlour is you can have a low milk line. So the milk in this parlour feeds into this big stainless steel line here. So that means the milk falls out of the cow and it doesn't have to be sucked up. So you can run a lower vacuum pressure, which is better for your cow's teats and better for udder health. The big disadvantage of a doubled up milking parlour is the capital cost. The extra cost to double it up is something like 20% over the cost of the milking equipment, and you only get about 20% extra output. So you could see an argument that it doesn't make financial sense, but if you put it over the total cost of the whole project, it only adds about 10% cost to double up the milking parlour. While I'm here, I'll mention the clusters. I am too tall to record this stuff. While I'm here, I'll mention the clusters. These are not the fancy Gia clusters with the ball bearings in them that don't start the vacuum until you put them onto the cow's teats. That was an option. It actually cost very little extra to upgrade all the clusters to them fancy clusters, but I could find no research anywhere to say they were a benefit, and they were just looked too cumbersome, and I thought these would be a better choice. These clusters have never given any problems. I'm extremely happy with them. Easy to keep clean, they're light, they're handy. I don't get them fancy clusters. They just seem awkward and overcomplicated, and I don't see how they provide any benefit. Another one of the more noticeable features in this milking parlour is that the floor is pig slats. They're extremely comfortable to walk on, and there's a lot of spring in them. Obviously that's not going to come through in the camera. Underneath the pig slats, there is about 1.5 feet of a drop to a concrete floor, which is tapered into the centre and then flows to the front of the parlour, where there's an open 6-inch pipe drain, which then drains into a storage tank. Another random feature which I had quite a hard time convincing people I needed was these custom made wide steps. The Gia steps are tiny to get in and out of the milking parlour pit. The steps provided by Gia, and they're just too small. Another point on the milk line, we went for a 4-inch milk line versus a 3-inch milk line. People will very often underspec a milk line, and it can cause you so many problems. If you start to get vacuum being backed up, milk can flick up from your clusters, touch the cow's teats, and cause you all sorts of health problems. These are the expensive iCar milk meters. I think I paid like a £16,000 premium for them over the less accurate type. Not sure if it was worth it, but at least I know I have accurate milk yields. No dump line in this parlour. We just went with a few dump buckets. Again, happy with that decision. Logic behind not going for the dump line really came down to two things. One, the cost. It was a lot more. I can't remember how much more. Possibly like £8,000 or £9,000. But also, you basically need to do the same wash cycle twice to get that dump line cleaned out well. And the cost of heating water is over 50% of our total electric bill. So I really did not want to be running a hot wash through another line in the milking parlour twice a day. We did mount drop-down hoses. There is 4 of these on each side. This was our original suggested solution for washing the parlour out. And then a friend of mine who also milks cows and also suggested the pig slats actually, so all credit to him. He told me that we will never use them vertical drop hoses, and all we want is one long hose that you can pull around. And this is literally the only hose we ever use. Them side drop hoses, they wouldn't be used once a month. Total waste of time. Notice that Tom Pemberton copied my design. Now, whether he seen it from me or he just thought of it himself, I'm not sure, but I came up with this myself. This is just some 50mm blue pipe that I had spare, and I didn't have time when I built the parlour to go and buy some paper towel holders. So that was my solution, and we still use it today. Most milking parlours would have a wall at the front here with their milk receiver vessel, their milk pump, and some other electronics. I really did not want anything in this milking parlour pit to obstruct the feeling of space. So that is why there's a tunnel in here, and all the pipework goes out through the tunnel to the far side of that wall, and we'll get to that at the end. So one of the things I had my heart set on when I was designing this milking parlour at the start was rapid exit. So rapid exit is kind of similar to this, except there's no wall or feeder here. And instead of the cows having to walk the whole way to the front before they exit, the cows can walk straight out. What really changed my mind on the rapid exit was the fact that I would have had to build a proper slurry tank the whole way around it. I went to see 2 farms on that day when I went to see milking parlours. Both had rapid exit. One had a shallow tank that he had to mix with like a whisk stir because he tried to save money and made it too shallow. And the other had solid floors, which he clearly spent ages scraping and hosing down. So I came to the conclusion that I would save the money, save the time and effort of having more to clean, and I'd put in sequential baling and see how my cow flow was. Because the big disadvantage of this system is if it's hard to get cows out of your milking parlour, you're going to lose a lot of time and it'll slow everything else down. This stallwork is the rapid exit stallwork from the company that makes these, called Betaby. So it has a little bit more height than the traditional version for this type of milking parlour. And the reason I spec'd it so that this was a little bit taller was that in future, if we had a problem with cows leaving the milking parlour, I could change this all over to rapid exit. That is also the reason that these feeders and that wall is block built, so I could knock them down if I ever needed to change this to rapid exit. The flexibility to switch this to rapid exit is also the reason that the milking parlour is built in the middle of the shed and not set off to one side, so that if I ever had needed to change this to rapid exit, if cow flow was an issue, it left me with the ability to switch this all over to rapid exit in the future. Thankfully, now that we're milking in it, there is no way I will ever change this to rapid exit. Exiting cows with the parlour is not an issue at all, and our cow flow is absolutely fantastic. But we'll get to cow flow later in the video. More unique things in this milking parlour is we have polycarbonate splash guards or dung guards behind the cows. This keeps everything in the pit of the parlour much cleaner, and there is no trough at the bottom, but it doesn't really matter because it falls onto the ground and still keeps everything clean. They're meant to be more see-through than this. They haven't been cleaned in a couple of months, and we have very hard water here, so the cloudiness is actually line scale on the other side of the screen, and it's never washed or wiped, and it creates like a crusty layer. It's fairly easy to clean. It takes about half an hour. We'll do one side and you'll be back to a nice clear screen. A DVD from Betaby whenever I was pricing this milking parlour, which showed me a few examples of their setup in other countries, and also gave me a design PDF of a recommended design for this milking parlour. And two key features which I took from their design, and I just give them the benefit of the doubt and decided to trust them that they knew what they were doing, was the really long trough with no dividers, and also this little dung trench, would you call it, along the bottom here. Also incredibly easy to install. We literally just set in a plank of wood, concreted in the floors, pulled the wood out, and then built our wall on top. This long feeder was perhaps one of the most controversial things which I done when building this milking parlour. Everyone insisted that the fact that cows could steal each other's meal was going to be a disaster, and it was a really bad idea. But I trusted the Betaby designers of this, and I wanted a feed trough system that was super easy to hose out. So at the minute, we can just run the hose down this, hose the whole thing, and there's little tiny drain holes at the front, which means the water can run out, but no meal falls out. Such a good design. And here's the part that really convinced me that this was the way to go. When I had to do my grant application, I had to try to justify how design decisions and features were going to make me money, so I could claim a higher return on investment to get the grant and get more points, so I was more likely to get the grant. And I tried my hardest to find evidence that an accurate feed to yield system was a benefit financially to a farm business. It's not. Accurate flat rate feed system is just as good as an accurate feed to yield system. Well, that sounds crazy, okay? Everyone thinks feed to yield saves them a fortune of money. And for us, coming into this parlour with feed to yield over our previous flat rate feed system saved us like £20,000 a year. So how can it be that I'm saying it makes no difference, and yet I'm saying it saved us £20,000 a year? It's because our flat rate feed system was not computer controlled, so it was not accurate. But even if cows steal each other's meal, all the cows on average have got the correct amount for their milk yield. So we have an accurate flat rate feed system, and the fact that cows steal a bit of each other's meal, it makes no difference to performance. Redundancy was a huge consideration when I was building this. I tried to make it so that if we had a failure, we could still milk. So the hydraulic baling system, I was so keen to be able to plug the tractor into that. A big reason for why I bought it. In the milking parlour pit, we have very bright LED lights. There's 14, 18, 16 in here, and it makes a really, really nice work environment. Above the milking parlour, we also have lights installed, and that is to encourage the cows to walk in to the well-lit area. Front of the milking parlour here, you'll notice I'm not as well lit. That is because there is no lights on the roof above the front area of the milking parlour, and that's to encourage the cows to leave this area and move around the corner to the better lit area. Cows leave the parlour and they come round this corner, and this is where they exit back to the cow house. And we have lights in here to keep it well lit, encourage them to move. And importantly, we also have no obstructions. Our foot bathing crush is right here, and if we foot bath the cows, it noticeably makes a big difference to cows exiting the parlour, and it is harder to get the cows out. So the original design had sorting gates down this side. That has since been abandoned. This needs to be kept totally open the whole way down to encourage cows to leave the milking parlour quickly. Cow flow is one of them areas where there is tons of research, tons of information on it. if you want to go and read about it. And I did read about it. So the dark front of the parlour encouraged cows to move. The lights above the milking parlour to encourage cows to enter. This gradient slope here at the back of the milking parlour, it was essential for the fall of our milking parlours going that way, but a gradient slope also encourages cows to move forward to the back of the milking parlour because cows like to stand on a slight incline. Fascinating stuff. As we move further back in our collecting yard, there's no lights above the back of the collecting yard. In winter, this area is very, very dark compared to the very well lit milking parlour. Again, encourages cows to move forward. It is extremely rare that we will have to go and bring any cows into our milking parlour. Even the last row, every single cow enters themselves. I had originally considered I would need a backing gate. Plenty of people told me, put in a backing gate. Very glad I didn't. With some smart design features, we've totally done away with the need for it. Our cows enter the collecting yard here. I put this railing in along here and forced the cows to enter this gate at the very back of the collecting yard, which sounded really stupid. And whenever I done this, I had people asking me, why are you putting this railing up? Why not just let the cows feed in from the side and have this whole area? But from what I read, it was really important that cows entered at the back and faced forward, and it absolutely made a difference. So the question you probably all really want to know the answer to is, why did I build a milking parlour and not go for robots? Everything I'm going to say about robots and milking parlours is totally counter to what everyone else says, which makes me kind of nervous about saying it, but I am convinced I am correct. Controversial statement number 1. Robots would have been cheaper. Milking parlours like this are more expensive. For the cost of this, I probably could have put in 4 robots and had plenty of money left over. Controversial statement number 2, and this one is much more controversial, but I can also back it up with much more evidence. Robots are more work than a conventional milking parlour. If I'd put in a robot or 4 robots, I would have been the one who had to run them. I would be the one who had the ability to make sure they were all working properly, to fix the problems. It would be totally unrealistic to think that I could hire a new member of staff and within a week they'd be able to be left to run the robots. That just is not going to happen. It could take months or up to a year to try to train a member of staff how to run robots effectively. My dad is totally tech illiterate. He hasn't a clue, doesn't have a mobile phone. He would have been zero help with robots. It all would have been my responsibility. With a milking parlour like this, my dad is perfectly capable of milking. I can start someone new, they can give us a hand to milk, and in the first evening they can do everything perfectly well. Much more flexible, much easier to get people with the ability to operate the equipment versus robots. The fact that once milking's done, I don't have to think about it until the next morning or the next day. That is so valuable. One of the things I really struggle with robotic milking systems is you're basically putting yourself in a position where you're always on call. Yes, people say they love robotic milking parlours, I get it. But if you imagine we had put in robots and we had went from spending 7.5 hours a day with 8 clusters milking 180 cows, we would have been telling everyone that robots are great, they've changed their life, fantastic investment. But if we were to go from this milking parlour, where it's currently taking an hour in the morning to milk and we're done, or 50 minutes in the evening to milk and we're done, and then go to a robotic system where we're always on call and we're pushing cows in and we're spending 2 or 3 hours a day managing the robots, we would say there have been a terrible investment. So I think a lot of the problems is that people are comparing a very bad old milking system to their new milking system and not comparing between the option of what they could have had versus what they put in. Backtrack a little bit before I get so much hate comments. There is absolutely plenty of legitimate, perfect examples for when you should put in robots. If you're milking 80 cows, you have a second job, whatever, that's fine. I'm just saying for my situation with 180 cows, a big milking parlour was 100% the right decision. Underneath my feet is the tunnel, which all the pipework goes through. So we're going to go through this door and we'll see all the milking parlour equipment. So this is the other side of the wall that we've seen in the milking parlour, and the tunnel is through here and all the pipework comes through on either side. This is our milk receiver vessel. So this is where the big 4-inch milk line feeds into. And then we have 2 milk pumps. Reason we have 2 milk pumps is again for redundancy. There's only 1 milk pump used during milking. Second milk pump is just here for the wash cycle. But we have an adapter which would allow us to connect this second wash pump straight into the milk line should one of them pumps ever fail. The idea of putting all of this equipment in here rather than in the pit of the parlour was my parlour manufacturer's idea. I cannot tell you how grateful I am that they suggested this to me. It has done wonders for keeping the space in there clutter free and also keeping all of this equipment relatively clean and tidy. And this is our milk sock and this is our plate cooler. And I know the plate cooler looks tiny for what it's doing, but apparently it is spec'd correctly and it is performing well. There's another little nice feature we added. This is how we take milk out for our calves. We feed whole milk to the calves, and this normally is connected to a milk taxi. So whenever we need milk out, we just flick this valve across and it fills into the milk taxi. Bulk tank room. This is built big enough for a 26,000 litre bulk tank. This one is only 16,000 litres and it's still far too big for what we produce, but it's about trying to future-proof everything. I have no idea where this business will be in 10 years' time, so that's why this room is left so big, and that back wall is non-load bearing, so if we ever need to, we can toss that wall, put a new bulk tank in. It's much easier to do that than having to renovate the entire building to try to fit in a bigger bulk tank. Final part of the tour is upstairs. Yes, we have an upstairs. This is my office. This was a huge consideration and a huge factor when I was building my milking parlour, is I wanted a big office space. Probably cost me close to £10,000 to be honest. By the time you put in the windows, the insulated tin in the roof, the concrete slabs, the blockwork, the cavity walls, it was expensive, but it was absolutely worth it. And you have this amazing view of the milking parlour out your windows. That is something I always wanted. Something I actually designed in like a 3D design software package when I was like 16, was this idea of a doubled up parlour with a window overlooking it. It's a mess. This is the plant room. We're never really up here, but we have 2 vacuum pumps, both variable speed. Again, redundancy, very important. We have a giant 600 litre boiler for the main wash cycle. This thing is costing us a fortune. Do not put in an electric boiler. I wish I hadn't. I should have went with oil, but it doesn't make sense to change it now. It's too much capital cost for the money I'd save. However, that was a mistake. We also have a boiler for our bulk tank wash, and we have a little hand wash boiler over there in the corner as well. Hence why over 50% of our electric is used to heat water. We have a giant cooler for the bulk tank, spec'd way too big for the amount of milk we produce. But again, that's better to have it too big now, and if you have more milk in the future, we don't have any issues. My dad keeps changing this boiler to on all the time and taking it off clock. Pretty much the end of your tour. It was more of a tour and less detailed than I imagined, but it is what it is. Hope you enjoyed this. Tomorrow we are reading a TB test. Saturday we are mowing silage, and then on Monday we're lifting our 5th cut silage. So next week's video will be us doing 5th cut silage. It's going to be wet. Hopefully we don't get stuck. Hopefully it's not too messy. Hopefully I have time to actually try to video it, but we'll see how that goes. So hit the subscribe button, like this video if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week for hopefully a successful 5th cut silage day and a half or 2.